Hey everybody, it's Mr. Loose, and your technique of the week is contrast and emphasis. Contrast and emphasis are two of the principles of design. As a refresher, the principles of design are when you take the ABCs for making understanding art, the elements of art, and the way you use them and put them to create different pieces of art would be our principles of design. There are 8 of them, and today we're just going to talk about these two. Now, contrast, the first one that we're going to talk about, is when you have the opposite elements arranged in a piece of art. So, what that means, contrast is when you have such a big noticeable difference in whether it's the size, color, or texture that you immediately can tell a difference. So, for example, if we look at the first one, size, we have a large box and then we have a smaller box. So those contrast because they're opposites, they're different. So the big box stands out because it makes the other box look really small, or in reverse, the little box stands out because it's dwarfed by how large that box is next to it. So that is contrast. So that can be done through size. Another example is through color. I have black and white as my example because those are opposites when it comes to color. But if you wanted to do something maybe like a complementary color, that would also be a contrast in color. Even a tint or shade, if you had a dark blue next to a light blue, those would definitely stand out because they're opposite. And then texture. Texture is another great way of showing contrast, whether it's through this cross hatching technique next to some stippling, or maybe you had a bumpy, rough looking texture in the background with something that's more furry and soft and fluffy looking in the foreground as your focal point. Okay, so those are all different examples of contrast through art. So you can do it through size, color, or texture. Now, if we look at the bottom of the page, we see emphasis. And emphasis is another principle of design. So the area of a piece of art that dominates attention or draws emphasis or interest is emphasis. Okay, so for example, we have a bunch of different houses, right? And they could all just kind of, nothing really stands out. But if we color one of them and leave the rest plain, then the first thing we notice is that little black house. Okay, so that is our emphasis. It's the first thing we notice. It stands out from the rest because this one is colored and the rest are not. Another way to show emphasis is through shape. So I have two of the same houses, but in the middle I have this funky shoe looking house. That shoe house definitely stands out because the other ones beside it aren't like that. You can show emphasis through size. So we can have a big house next to a little house, and the first thing we're going to notice is that big house, okay? It draws our attention. That's what emphasis is all about. Another example could be detail. So maybe some people drew a bunch of like cute little simple houses, and then there's one house that seems larger. It has windows. Maybe the roof's a little fancy. It's got a chimney, smoke coming out. Like you really pushed yourself and went the extra way. So that extra amount of detail can also draw emphasis. And then isolation. So if we separate something far enough, so we have a bunch of houses that are the same, and even though we have the exact same type of house, we kind of put it way back in the background. Maybe like this is somebody's house that um, is a loner, or um, I don't know, like think of a story like that goes with it. So like it's so far away that this becomes the emphasis, or that. Either way, you notice that there is a huge difference. And then, last but not least, another way to show emphasis is through contrast. So, what we just learned about size, color, and texture, that can even be used to draw your attention into a certain part of the artwork. So, when I'm talking about the contrast of the cool background with the warm foreground, it creates an emphasis that draws your eye to that part of the painting. You immediately know exactly what I just talked about. So I hope this helps. And yeah,